I'm Lori Warner-Dickinson with the Department of State Lands. I'm actually the Northern Region Manager. I just happen to be the project manager for this rulemaking effort that we're doing. With me is Anita Huffman. She's the staff lead for the rulemaking. And so that's who we are. Thank you all for coming. What we'd like to do today, this is not a public hearing. This is an informational meeting. What we'd like to do today is share some information with you about what we're doing and a little bit about the legislation that was passed. And then invite you to share with us, any comments or concerns that you have about specifically what we're doing. So I'd like to keep it fairly casual, so that, if you have a question about any of the material that I'm talking about, just go ahead, feel free to interrupt and ask a question. I'd like to keep it fairly informal if we could. We had a similar meeting in Salem a few weeks ago, and we have another meeting in Salem tomorrow. We'll have to have a conference call with some folks on the east side because of some time constraints. So things are happening pretty quickly. So as you may know, there was legislation passed during the legislative session. And what DSL has to do now is change the rules for our motorized dredging permit to comply with the statute. We have a deadline of January 1st for rulemaking, and there's a whole bunch of process that goes along with rulemaking. So that's why things are happening so quickly. So we're going through rulemaking. Our intent is just to change the rules so that we're complying with the statute. We're not opening the rule for other changes, although we will take comments on the rules. Our intent is just to comply with the new statute. So, you've received some handouts. You should have a copy of the legislation. I've got to say, this is one of the more complicated pieces of legislation that I've seen.
Thank you.
Pretty complicated. So this is the legislation just for your reference. You should have a handout that kind of provides a summary of what we're doing. A map that describes the permit areas, the subject permit areas, and then our draft administrative rule that's actually going to go out on public notice October 1st. So this is the draft that's going to go out on public notice. Okay, so you should have 4 pieces of information. Okay, so let's first talk about the legislation. How many of you were involved at all in the legislative session? A few of you attended quite a few meetings. So here's, as you may know, that there were lots of bills related to suction dredging and motorized mining. This Senate Bill 838 is the one that passed, and it has been signed by the governor, so it's now law that goes into effect January 1st. So what does this legislation do?
Made us all criminals. That's right. Yep, we all made us all criminals.
I'm sorry. So, DSL did not have a position on this legislation. We were neutral. We are only responsible for implementing what the law is.
Which is illegal.
Well, ma'am,
Which is
I'd like to
illegal.
interject right there. If that was interjecting what the law is, it's obviously they have broken the law so viciously that they are criminals themselves because they did not adhere to the 1866 and the 1872 laws, which overwhelmingly clear what it is. And therefore, whenever we, as a group, went to Salem and talked to them about this, as you know, they had a changing. And there was a cease and desist even written on them, and they still followed through, even against the laws. These folks, and nowadays haven't been done, they themselves have broke the law so much until it's shame on them.
Well,
it is unbelievable.
So the legality of the statute is not something that I'm going to be able to address
And again,
or
the
to deal
judge
with.
himself made a determination on the law saying, hey, they sent out a form, a questionnaire to the folks saying, oh, are you recreational? Knowing that there's a play on words, and naturally 80% said yes. They made a full mistake because they're lightheartedness, and therefore it is a business. I don't care if you call it one thing, because it's to abstract gold. And it was abstract a living and it was a living. That shows you how criminal this is.
So the legislation is what it is, and I'm so sorry that you're going to hear me say this over and over again. I can't do anything about the legislation from here. What I have to do is implement it. And in terms of the legislation and what it means and how it's interpreted, we are trying to interpret it with these rules. But you have recourse with your representatives, with your elected officials. There could be a change in the next legislative session. So that's your recourse. I cannot weigh in. I can't weigh in on the legality, but what I would like to do is inform you. That's my role today. I want to tell you what we think it means and what we're doing to address it, so that at least you'll have the information that you need. So that's my role. But so I really can't talk about, to speak to whether or not this legislation is legal.
Were you sequestered?
No, I just, it's not my role.
It doesn't bother you that you could be held civilly or criminally liable for not stopping this? Because that's the reality.
It's legislation. We're doing what we have to do to
Did you guys
address
take an oath
it.
of office when you become state employees?
No.
Good thing, huh?
Well, so we can talk about the information, and at least I want to give you the information. Okay, can we do that? Okay, good. All right, so what did this legislation do specifically? It imposed a moratorium on suction dredging and other forms of motorized mining on certain streams of Oregon, starting January 1st, 2016. Between 2014 and 2016, it imposed certain restrictions on motorized mining. Okay, are you filming me?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'll try to
Public meeting.
smile more. So the operating restrictions include a 500-foot distance between equipment, operating hours from 9 to 5, and a prohibition against leaving your equipment unattended in the waterway.
What about the permits? It says authorization is only 850?
Yes,
And why is that?
so that's what the bill says. The Department of State
So
Lands
that
will
means-
limit the number of authorizations that we give to 850.
And what's the purpose of the permit to begin with? Is it for use of water?
This is for operation in the waterway below ordinary high water.
Is it for the use of the water?
It's to do any disturbance of any of the substrate below the bed and banks, of the waterway below ordinary high water. That's what the permit is for.
Again, Lori, right there on the permit, we have a right. It is not for us to give them a permit or ask for a permit. We have a right, and there is no set number. We have a right to go and do this. That makes them again criminal.
Well,
Everything is a granted right.
It's a granted right.
Yeah.
Please
Not just
understand that.
permission, it's granted.
yeah, I think the state of Oregon respectfully disagrees.
How can you
That,
disagree?
a permit is required.
Okay,
A
I got
permit
another
is
question.
required.
Okay, the water. It's not for use of water.
No, we don't regulate the use of water.
So you're actually regulating the use of the stream bed?
We regulate disturbance, it's called removal or fill, disturbance of the material, the stream bed material.
Well, we have
Yeah.
to take the machine out every night. That's my dredge weighs 600 pounds, and I was half a mile down the river from any count. That would cause me to have a heart attack. It's a health issue. You follow me? And I'm not gonna take it out. You get these cops here to go get it. I'm not taking it out.
I would like to make one comment, and then I will be quiet. I'm going to read something to you. My name is Rick Barclay. I'm the executive chair of the Galice Mining District. In PP&L versus Montana, and I'll make this as brief as I can, the state of Montana tried to extract money from PP&L. They went to court, went to the appeals court, went to the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals. This ruling is from 2012. The rule for state riverbed title assumed federal constitutional significance under the equal footing doctrine. Now bear with me. In 1842, the court decided that for the 13 original states, the people of each state, based on principles of sovereignty, hold the absolute right to all their navigable waters and the soils under them, subject only to rights surrendered and powers granted by the Constitution to the federal government. Martin versus Lacey of Waldell, 1842. In a series of 19th century cases, the court determined that the same principle applies to states later admitted to the Union because the states in the Union are co-equal sovereigns under the Constitution. There's various cases listed. These precedents are the basis for the equal footing doctrine under which a state's title to these lands was conferred not by Congress, but by the Constitution itself. Now we need to listen to this carefully. In Oregon State Land Board versus Corvallis Sand and Gravel, and it follows that any ensuing question of navigability, and this is important, for the determining state riverbed title are governed by federal law. The title consequences of the equal footing doctrine can be stated in summary form. Upon statehood, the state gains title within its borders to the beds of water then navigable. Okay? And what that says is, although it is not, it may allocate and govern these lands according to the state law, subject only to the paramount powers of the United States to control such waters for the purpose of navigation in interstate and foreign commerce. And I'm almost done. And what that says is, this is the court's ruling, the United States maintains any title vested in it before statehood to any land beneath the waters then not navigable and not tidally influenced to be transferred or licensed if and as it chooses. Basically, the states have no jurisdiction on non-navigable waters, and as the chair of the Galice Mining District, I want to go on record stating that the Galice Mining District considers this an unlawful act and will not abide by it, nor will it tell its members to abide by it, and now I'm done.
So maybe we need to back up a little bit and talk about the removal fill law, which applies to removal or fill activities, disturbance of bed and bank material below ordinary high water in any waterway in the state, regardless of ownership. It has nothing to do with ownership. It's just about removing and filling material in the waterway. Okay? So a permit's required to do that in the state of Oregon.
Where do you get
It's
the authority to do that?
Removal fill law.
Is it over out of the 404 laws or the 404?
You know, it's interesting. Oregon has both a state and a federal regulation. It's very similar to the Clean Water
In the
Act.
404s, it was made so when they were dredging it out or digging through the bedrock, they wanted to know where they were digging it up and where they were filling it. It doesn't do anything for just moving the settlements.
So we regulate removal, fill, and alteration.
When you're dredging, no, you're not really removing it.
You're altering.
You're still staying the same body of
It
water.
doesn't state that in there, but they're just altering.
That's the removal fill law.
Removal and fill. I happen to be on a group of folks who literally went and opposed the removal of Bouldering Dam. Now, whenever the Lincoln Savage Dam went down the road, the trees of silt, Not one thing was done to those who took that dam away from us. We're talking a huge bed of silt clear to the mouth of the road. When the Golden Way went down, it was a larger wall. It had created to this day an incredible kit of silt on top of the first line of silt. And not one permit on that issue, I believe, was even paid. And George Hunter himself lied to us overwhelmingly that, oh, they stopped and put a stay on the removal. Now, you're talking about a dredge that literally filters way between here to this wall. And in other words, it's not even a thimble in a lake of water disturbance. And now they're putting this rule on us when in fact, look at those who had the power to remove dams to create this hideous insult. But now we have chromium-6 in our drinking water due from the black goo that's down into the water that's down in Grants Pass area. Well, Lori, there is just no context to this huge removal and field, as you call it, to those who are supposedly in charge, and not one person was held liable.
I'm going to interrupt you, because what I really want to do is get this information out to the folks who want to have it. I really want to try to stick to this subject. I mean, I'd be happy to talk to you after the meeting if you want to talk about the Golden Dam or some other removal fill issue, but what I want to do is make sure that people walk out of here knowing what's going on. So does that sound like a fair idea? Do you want to hear what's going on?
I want to hear your take on moving the dredge out. Why do we have to move it?
You know,
that is ridiculous. That is retarded.
I do not know.
I don't care if 5 people are 500 feet away from me. That means I get more gold. But I'm not going to take it out. Why am I going to take it out?
I do not know why that's in
What do you
statute, to be
clarification on
honest
that?
with you.
Move
I
the
don't
shore,
know.
take it out.
I think it was so people didn't stake a spot. And
You have to stake
preclude others.
spots. It's about finding the deposits of gold and staying on your deposit.
It's a claim, it's
Fuck
your
around,
business.
if you're finding a deposit of gold, you stay
Yeah.
on it till it's exhausted.
So I don't know why, if anybody else knows why that provision's in there, I do
Because
not
they don't
know.
want us here, that's why they say.
Well,
They don't
as
want
far
us
as,
here.
I understand where it's coming from. If you're on your own mining claim that you have filed through the process of filing for a claim, nobody should be in there anyway, so why should I have to take my dredge out?
You know, I don't know why that provision is in
Well,
there.
that's
Does
it.
anybody else know that was
Because
part
they
of the
don't want us there,
legislation?
it's ugly. The rafters go down like, oh, it's an ugly
So how does that rule apply to something that's, say, a permanent improvement that's made on a mining claim in conjunction with assessment work that is actually permanent?
You know, I wouldn't think that you could remove it.
Well, that's the
It's
point.
permanent.
Therefore, we would be in violation, wouldn't we?
I don't know.
Well, if we get a boat
That's a
permit
good
on my dredge
question.
with a little
Could
bit of
you-
motor, I guess I'll leave it there.
Yeah, I've got a note here to
Well,
look
put
into
a seat on my
that.
dredge and it's thinking motor, and I'll have a boat, I'll leave my boat in the river, how about that?
Okay, so we talked about the moratorium. In between 2014 and 2016, there's these restrictions. 850 authorization cap, that's the only,
No one buys it.
that's the number that we can issue. 500-foot distance between equipment, operating hours between 9 and 5, and prohibition against leaving equipment in the water.
What was the basis for the permit number? What was the determining criteria?
You know,
2009 number.
I think it was close to the 2009.
No, I know that. I want to hear it from them, what the
I
criteria.
believe that's where the number came from.
2009 number.
Okay.
Uh-huh.
Okay. Well, it would be
Okay,
fair to have the
so
guides.
these operating restrictions apply to rivers and tributaries that contain any portion of essential salmonid habitat or naturally reproducing populations of bull trout. This is approximately 85% of Oregon's stream miles. The moratorium will apply to the same waterways, but only above the lowest extent of spawning habitat. So this map is where we have determined these restrictions apply. So in the red area, the pink area, that's our 850 limit right there. The yellow area, you would have to contact the department to find out. And the green area, there is no limit.
Because they're gonna build there.
So I got a question.
Yeah.
There's an area out here, Applegate Reservoir. Salmon steelhead can't go above it. We have Elliott, Middle Fork, Sturgis, Carberry Creek. And there's no salmon steelhead above the dam. And those are a lot of placer mines up in those areas. So would this actually affect them too?
Well, it says if any portion of the waterway and any tributary thereof, so if it's a tributary to an ESH stream, or any portion of that stream has ESH, these restrictions apply.
Even if it don't have salmon?
Oh, really? Lori, again, it has been proven in meetings past repeatedly, and there are writings and proof for years and years that on the salmon and the beddings of these areas, dredging is extremely important because it makes, there's a fancy word for 3-foot or 4-foot holes, you know, for a salmon situation. If you have been out of the river, you'll see after dredge hit, if you're a fisherman, you want that hole. So it's the other way around. It was the miners who decided not to mine whenever there was fish in the area, but you see, the Department of Fish and Game jumped on it and made it look like they made a ruling. And now you see, as it has been overwhelmingly proved, that dredging is a benefactor. And then they write this rule right here is totally false. This is totally unacceptable.
Well, this is what the legislation says. So in between 2014 and 2016,
This one right here. That would be on section 89.
So between 2014 and 2016, the governor's office is required to convene a work group to evaluate some of these issues that have been raised relative to motorized mining.
Now, who gets to go to those meetings?
So, you know, I don't know how the governor's office is convening those meetings.
Because we,
They
as
haven't-
minors, were never consulted when they were writing this abomination. We were totally out of the loop and would not, they wouldn't even acknowledge our existence.
My whole point, my question is related to his. Stakeholders, we're stakeholders.
Yeah.
We're
I
actually
would-
more
I
than
would think-
stakeholders. We have 3 organized mining districts in Southwest Oregon. We actually have a legislative power equal to this state. Did you know that? We have the right to draft local rules and regulations. These are what you find in the 1872 Act. Those are the local rules and regulations it pertains to. So, needless to say, time after time after time, as these issues come up, the miners have always been left out of the table. It's always the state agencies, the Indian tribe, and the environmentalists. Never the miners. You know, I made this speech on the Capitol steps. We have a congressionally granted right to draft mining legislation, but we're never there. We're not allowed there.
So I know
I'd
that-
like to have proof of that in the state legislation as to where that particular statement has its basis. I think it's a bunch of bull.
1872 Mining Act, 1866 federal. Go look it up, Bob.
Senate rule, the House rule.
You can go look it up in
whatever
30
rule.
USC 22, 30 USC 28.
Back down, sir.
So, I'm gonna keep us on track, because these peripheral issues, I know they're very important to you, but I'm not an attorney. I am just
possibly consult with one.
responsible for implementing these regulations, and by golly, if I don't get this information
Well,
to you
praise the
guys,
Lord. Why
I
don't you
will not have
implement the
done my
laws that we
job.
already have?
Well,
So, I really want to get this information to you.
May I
I'm going to
say-
keep going,
Hey, this
I'm going to
gentleman
be
here.
kind of assertive about it. Be happy to talk to anybody afterwards about all of these concerns.
But you know,
And we're recording what you're telling us.
if that's the issue, is we can't get anywhere,
I'd like you
no
to have
representation.
you say your piece, and then maybe at the end here have a comment by Drew. But if
Okay.
you could just get your information out,
Great,
I'd appreciate it.
thank
very
you,
much.
because if I don't accomplish that, I've driven all the way down here for nothing.
That's the
I
idea.
I really want to do that. Okay.
You were talking about essential salmon habitat. What is the purpose of removing these creeks from dredging usage or mining usage under the essential salmon habitat? What's the purpose?
Well, I believe there's concerns about potential adverse effects of
But there's no
mining on
science to
salmon.
prove that.
Oh, okay.
You know,
What, we kill
there's-
fish or something?
There's some science out there that says both, frankly.
We kill fish?
You mentioned peripheral issues, and that was what I wanted to speak to. Let's get away from peripheral issues. I've been going to these meetings since 2004, and inevitably, the miners are reduced to arguing peripheral issues. So let's get away from that and get to a basic thing that has to do with your agency that you should be able to answer yes or no. Is your agency required to follow law?
Yes.
You are required to follow the
Yes.
law. All right. What law?
The removal fill law.
What administrative law? Federal or state?
It's a state law.
State law. Well, I'm here to tell you that the federal overrides it. The supremacy clause of the Constitution overrides state. 838 is an illegal bill. And when it is implemented, it will be an illegal law. Therefore, are you telling me that DSL is required? It says here that you must revise. Must is an imperative. You must revise to comply with 838. Are you telling me that you must revise to comply with an illegal law? That's the question.
We must revise our administrative rules to comply with Senate Bill 838. Yes.
Two things are going to happen the minute that happens. Miners are going to go underground, or this state is going to be overrun with lawsuits the like of which the state has never seen.
Right.
It will bankrupt this state, which is already almost bankrupt. Now, those aren't peripheral issues. Those are right up front. This bill is illegal. There's no doubt that agencies in the state can regulate, but it says reasonably regulate. By court law says they can reasonably regulate. A prohibition is not reasonable, and that has been proven in federal court. That is unreasonable. Therefore, 838 is illegal on its face. But DSL is going to comply with it anyway.
Yes, we are.
Then what are we doing here?
I'm telling you what we're doing.
No, you're not. You're telling me that we're going to get this rammed down our throat no matter what we say in this room today or any other day.
Well, this is not the appropriate place to debate whether the law is legal. It just isn't. It's not the appropriate place. You do that in the courts. You
I
do that in the
wholeheartedly
legislature.
agree.
You do it in the legislature.
And that's the agency's,
I can't.
that's the agency's final word. If you don't
Yes.
like it, sue us. It's a sad day in the United States of America when miners or anyone else in this country cannot get reasonable regulation outside of a courtroom. That is sick.
This is the legislation that passed. This is what we're going to implement.
You do not have to follow an illegal law.
Oh, I'm going to move along now.
You know, during the Holocaust, that's what they said. Oh, we were just following orders.
Okay. So,
I think we ought to leave.
that's what the bill says.
Just, we got it all right
You
here.
have a copy of it. You can look at
Let's
it.
leave, we got it all.
You can hopefully understand how we created this summary and that you can see all of these provisions in the track changes version of the Senate Bill 838. Okay, so you can see it there. So, between the time period of 2014 and 2016, we need to have authorizations in place for people to use that comply with Senate Bill 838. Those general authorizations are approved through rulemaking.
I think you guys need to pay us for getting out there and correct.
The word is recreational in here. That is a false word. It is not recreational. It's a business. It is not recreational.
But if we're not recreating,
It's not recreational.
and we're doing it for a living, we don't have to get a permit, right?
So we are revising the general authorization. That is the permit to disturb stream bed and stream bank
You don't need a
material
permit.
from Oregon's waterways.
We have the granted right already.
So the rule, we're doing administrative rulemaking. The rule is right here. So how many of you do have a permit that you obtain online from us?
One permit.
I got one.
So you would still have an online process, and it would have these new restrictions in the permit that's issued. This is the rule upon which we will issue the permit. draft. The draft is going to go out on public notice October 1st. And we invite everyone's comments. So it's this document that says, general authorization for recreational motorized dredging. You can see it's in track changes so you can see what changed. This is our proposed rulemaking.
That's for recreational?
It's for motorized mining.
What about
We are
non-motorized?
full-fledged miners.
So non-motorized mining in essential salmonid habitat, if you remove or if you disturb less than 1 cubic yard of permit salmon.
How small that is?
Yes.
What's the penalty? Any penalties?
I think statute, I think the new bill has some penalties in it.
I didn't see anything.
Class A misdemeanor.
Yeah.
Page
Okay, so
2.
the new rule has the operating restrictions and a proposal for how we plan on determining who gets one of the 850 permits. You'll see that on the back of your, I have a summary on the back of this handout.
Section 5.
Okay, so what we plan on doing is between January 1st and February 28th, the first 2 months of the year, we will receive online applications. And we will review those applications for the number of years that the individual has had a DSL permit or a DEQ permit since 2006. Then
How come you include DEQ?
we included DEQ because there are waterways that didn't require a permit previously to this that will now require a permit. So you may have had a DEQ permit, but you didn't have a DSL permit. So that's why so if you had either one of those
You're saying the new
permits,
statute just vaguely says whoever held permits, so you're saying either or now.
yeah.
But then what about
We
the part
didn't
with the
want
claims? Why are you
to,
giving people precedence to
Excuse
hold
me?
claims?
that was a suggestion from various,
Various liberals? I guarantee no minor made that suggestion.
actually,
Or
it did come
conservative.
from some of the miners. I think it was Tom, actually. If you've had a DSL or a DEQ permit since 2006, you will get a point for every year you've had one since then.
Because they're legally required to have both permits to operate, shouldn't they have had both?
Yeah, they weren't though. That's why we included the DEQ permit. So, and a lot of
People
their.
did not have both permits. and
Yeah.
were operating.
So if they were operating in a non-ESH stream where they had the 50 cubic yard limit, then they didn't need a DSL permit.
And
they
they
still
keep
needed
track
a
of which stream required those and which didn't.
Actually, it's a statewide permit.
No, I understand that. So my question was, if they were operating and actually were legally required to have both permits to operate in an ESH region, but they did not have both permits, and they were operating anyway, how are you tracking that?
Yeah,
Because
I
the
don't
system
know
as
if we're
it's
gonna be
written
able
would
to.
reward that.
I don't know if we're gonna be able to track that, actually, effectively. Because it is a statewide permit. We're reliant on what
And
the
you don't
applicant
have
tells us
sufficient
whether.
information from monitoring to, there's a requirement in the Clean Water Act to submit monitoring information. And so you're saying DSL does not have sufficient data?
Well, we're not at the Clean Water Act, we're the removal.
Right, but they're both required here.
Yeah, so we don't have reliable information to determine if someone should have had a permit and didn't, unless we're there observing it. Yeah.
They would probably have a copy of the mining law and just, they didn't have it.
I'd be very
In the
curious
board.
to see how that works out.
So then, the other priority is given in this proposal to those who hold a federal mining claim since 2006. We'll be asking for claim numbers to verify that.
Excuse me, I don't have a claim in Oregon. I am a prospector, and I'm looking for a claim, and I'd like to find a claim. but you won't allow me to do it with 850 permits. I cannot prospect. You have to prospect before you can find and file a claim. The federal government fosters and encourages prospecting and mining. Oregon DSL comes along and says, no they don't, you can't do it because we won't let you. That is illegal. Don't you understand what illegal means?
I understand what you're saying. It's just not the right forum for me to respond.
How can you possibly discriminate? You're a state agency. You're under the authority of the state. How can you discriminate between people? You're supposed to treat all classes of people the same. I'm discriminated against because I can't go on anything that DSL regulates, and I can't prospect for a deposit to be able to find a claim. Illegal.
How did they, I would like to know how, if the number of permits is issued back to 2009, why did they go back to 2006 on the claims?
Oh, that's the year that we have the most reliable data.
So,
No, it's just not.
so it's kind of like hindsight, anyone who's filed.
No, we had to pick a time period,
Well, why couldn't
between
you-
which we would evaluate the years of, the statute says that we would give priority to those who have held permits for the longest period of time prior to 2014.
Well, for the claims.
And in order to make this decision, we wanted to have really reliable data.
So are you going to count the permits that were found to be illegal when Waldo with DEQ in court and that claim was invalidated for being unlawful?
We're going to look at our database to
That
determine
doesn't
the
answer the
years of
question.
permit.
That was an illegal permit. So are you going to count the illegal permit?
Am I going to count it? We're going to use our database to determine the number of years of applicant who's had. That's the most reliable data we have, and we want to use our most reliable data. So if there are more applicants with the same number of years for the items above, then we will use a random selection process. So at any point, if there are more people applying that have the same number of points, if you will, then we will use a random process to make that decision. So,
Did you add the length of time, like the years, if they're the same? A person holding a permit longer, for longer years would have residence, right?
I'm sorry.
A person holding a permit for longer years would have more points, right?
Right, to 2006. So 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. It's 8. 6 years of a mining claim, that's 8.
So if you have a permit and not a mining claim for like 6 years, but no mining claim, does that still count though?
Somebody else can come in and trump the road if they sell the claim.
This gives priority to those who hold a federal mining claim. Now, I invite you to comment on that, if that's a problem for you.
That's a problem.
Just any claim. We'll ask for claim numbers. All you need is 8 years, so you give us the numbers that add up to 8 years total.
If I get hurt, can I transfer my permit?
Excuse me, I'm sorry.
If I was to get hurt, could I transfer my permit to someone else?
You know, we don't have permit transfers for this activity. I don't know. Would you ask that question?
Can I give it to someone else?
I don't know.
The current permit regulation says that you have to be on site.
Yeah, the draft says that whoever's name, whoever holds the permit has to be there. So, I don't know. That's a good question. I don't think right now there's any provision for it, but I have to go look.
You asked me a question a second ago about any questions about this or any problem with this. I make my living as a gold miner. That's my job.
So we can get on
You're gonna put me out of work. You gonna give me unemployment? I'm not eligible. That's what this is doing.
You might be randomly selected.
Yeah, right.
Can we go on unemployment since we're losing our jobs here? These guys want to go on unemployment, big losers and stuff.
What happens if you can't prospect, and as a result of that, you can't do your assessment work and you lose your property because you can't hold your claim anymore? Is there going to be just compensation for loss of property for public purposes?
More lawsuits.
I think y'all need to take it.
So, this is what we're proposing in our rules.
Yeah, there's an inequity here for those that are not required at this point to have a DSL permit because they are currently not in non-essential habitat.
Right.
In essential habitat. So those people are operating at a disadvantage because they haven't had to be required to have a permit.
Right, that's why we included or the DSL or the DEQ
Excuse me?
permit. That's why we included either a DSL permit or a DEQ permit, because I believe the DEQ permit is still required. So either one of those permits, because we recognize that that would be a problem.
The first one didn't sound awful helpful to have an extra permit on top of another permit when we have a granted right in the first place.
Yeah,
I
I know
find
that.
something very illegal back there.
I know that
Very criminality.
a lot of you understand that. I know. I'm getting that message.
It's too bad the agency didn't understand that.
We didn't make the law.
The lawmakers-
Legislature.
the lawmakers did.
Legislature made the law. We're just implementing
But why
what the
do they send you here to
legislature
take the
gave
heat?
us. What's that? I'm sorry.
You're implementing and you're saying it was read to us, and that makes it sort of a forced law upon us that we are overwhelmingly rejected. We have been overwhelmingly vocal about it, very civil about it, and overwhelmingly groups have just denied every bit of the truism that we put forth. It seems to be like, and now you're mentioning about the DEQ extra bit. Boy, that sounds exciting to have an extra DEQ. And what is DEQ? That's another agency that sees authority that they did not have authority. That's what DEQ is.
Okay, so here we are. I've told you about what the legislation says. I've told you what we are doing, that we have to revise this general authorization, and I've explained to you our proposed strategy for selecting the 850 permits.
Is your permit still going to be free?
Yes,
That's good.
that's good. Okay, so here's our rulemaking schedule.
I'm sorry, I got here a little late. You're giving points for people that had a DEQ permit?
Or a DSL permit.
Okay, how far back in time?
2006.
2006. So you're going to give points to people that had an invalid, illegal DEQ
Yeah,
permit?
that point's been made,
That point's been made.
yes.
Okay.
But it just doesn't matter, does it?
Well,
That's right.
it's,
It don't.
I'm not I'm not in a role that's going to change the legislation.
As an agency official that's supposed to be informing us, I see a lot of shoulder shrugging, and I
Well,
don't know.
Yeah.
Can you please explain to this room how you have any business regulating something that you don't know anything about?
Well, I believe that we regulate removal fill in waterways, that we do that through the removal fill law. And we can argue about whether or not the permit is legal or illegal, but that's not going to help me accomplish what I need to accomplish here today.
It's just shoving this down our throats whether we like it or not.
Well,
I think what she's doing is she's implementing the law that was passed by lawmakers. And as part of that, she's holding a public hearing. And she wants to hear everything that everyone wants to say. But she's not going to be changing what the lawmakers have already put forward.
We already had that.
Right.
argument.
No, but she does have an obligation
So
to
this
go
is
back
not
to
a
her
public
superiors and
hearing?
say, hey, there's an awfully good problem going
Well,
on.
This
that's
is not
what
a
she's
public
going to be
hearing.
doing, is bringing that information back as part of the public hearing.
yeah, so we are recording your comments. I am, after this meeting, I will convey some of the things that I've heard here today to the people who are on point for the governor's work group. So, you know.
Those who wrote that bill, Ms. Lord, should be standing here, not you. You are
Well,
the
that's your
proverbial sergeant that burned
elected
the duty.
officials.
You back out, and they ask you to whine, oh, it's my job. That's exactly what it's your job, to administrate something that is good for you.
Well, your senators and representatives are the ones that pass this legislation. So if you'd like to talk with them, I encourage you to call them. So, on this handout where you have the summary of what we're doing, I'm going to let you hold that thought right there. You have a rulemaking schedule. So on October 1st, we are sending out this public notice that will be on these administrative rules. And we are accepting comments for the month of October. We must have something in place by January 1st.
Question, who's making the rules? And are there any minors being involved in the
I already
rule
asked.
process?
We are talking now. We have talked to some other minors in the drafting of this. Unfortunately, the timeline is so expedited that we don't have time.
Can you give us a name?
And we are limiting this rule to what's in this new legislation. So there isn't a whole lot to debate about, except the strategy for choosing the 850. If you want to participate in a meaningful way in this rulemaking, think about this strategy that we're proposing. Does it make sense? If it doesn't, we have to implement the 850. So if you have other ideas about how we should do that, we want to hear about it.
Who do you send the comments to? Are these people are there?
So we'll have a public notice. We're not accepting comments until October 1st. This is an advanced, you're getting an advanced look at what we've drafted up. So this is what's going to be in the public notice. And if we have your email address, you will get an email notification inviting your comment. And it'll have the directions on how to submit the comments.
I just have one question. If you want to hear from us, how come this meeting is not being recorded and taken back to your superiors, which would be a very good help for us and for the state of Oregon to know what we're thinking, what's going on, and it's not right that you're not doing it. That's all I do.
Well, we'll record the public hearing.
Yeah, this is just an informational meeting to tell you about what we're proposing to do to pick the 850.
Are you gonna send out invites, like DEQ sent me permit, you need to re-update your permit, right? Are y'all gonna do that? Or do I need to fill out a permit and then you go for the guessing of it and your selection?
So we'll accept according to this proposal, we'll accept applications for January and February. So you can submit your application online anytime in January, during those months.
And you'll be working with DEQ or just by yourself?
What do you mean?
Well, they have different permit systems, right?
They do. They're a separate permit.
Well, are they doing this?
So they're renewing their permit, I think.
In a different way?
In a different way, yeah. I'm so sorry, yeah. I think they plan on having a renewed permit on June 1st.
So we're not gonna know until after March 1st whether we've got a permit or not.
It'll probably be more like April.
It doesn't matter yet.
Ms. Anita Huffman.
Yes.
Ma'am, it says here you are staff lead for section dredging rulemaking. Ma'am, have you dredged? Do you dredge? Have you mined? Where do you get your knowledge to make rulemaking from on dredging?
I regulate for the removal fill program.
Where do you get your knowledge from this?
From the rules that
How
were
do you
used.
not know what you're doing if you don't have hands-on experience?
I am simply directed to follow the rules
Then if you're following the
that we're
rules,
told.
you're not following the 1866 and 72 laws.
I am employed by the state of Oregon.
Ma'am, you're another sergeant.
Did you have another question? I'm sorry, I don't know anybody's name.
You asked that we suggest an alternative means to allocate these permits. Fish and Game has a unit-by-unit limitation on certain hunting licenses, and they do it with a draw, so that everybody has an equal chance with a limited number of fish permits available. Seems to me that would give everybody an equal chance at this limited number, which has been established by the legislature in their great wisdom. But it seems to me that if everybody has an equal chance at the draw, that is much more equitable than anything that I have seen so far.
Why is it limited
Yeah,
when it's open for all?
Unfortunately, the statute does have a provision that says we will base the priority will be given to those who have held permits from the department for the longest period of time prior to 2014. That's actually in the legislation. So, to the extent practicable, that provides us with a little bit of latitude because we're trying to come up with something that's practicable.
But you know, the Fish and Game does that same thing. That they give priority to people that have been have lost on the draw in prior year, and that gives them some priority on the next year.
Oh, that's interesting.
And so that can be built into the draw, just the same way that
That
fishing.
specific note about how they give priority to those who
It sounds to me like the way they designed this is that they were trying to protect the interests of Oregonians who have already had a stake in dredging in reaction to the moratorium in California. And so it sounds to me that the representative legislatures were taking that into account. Sounds totally rational to me.
I don't know.
Yes, I believe that that's true.
Did you ever serve in the armed forces?
Yes, sir, I have. I'm a Vietnam veteran.
And did you fight so that each state can discriminate against?
I was on the Macon. Where were you?
Is this all one country still, where everybody in this country is supposed to?
Do you have a question?
Yeah, under this bill and everything, what's gonna happen to the public lands that are set aside by Oregon for the other, for like people that are out there? You got like Lawson Bar and stuff down in Canyonville. And what happens there? They all have to have permits now, or?
I'm not sure what you're
For
talking
dredging,
about.
they go down there, you know, it's a recreational area set aside by Oregon. What are we going to do?
Set aside
with
by
that?
Oregon.
It's a state property that's.
Yeah, so the removal fill law is a regulatory law. It's just about regulating removal and fill in waterways. The ownership issues, you know, regardless of who owns the waterway, that's a totally separate issue that really doesn't have anything to do with the permit.
Right, but this is just 850, right? We're just 800. I'm not understanding. I mean, I'm watching our neighbor, California, and they got a mess going. I mean, they got lawsuits coming out to yin yang and everything else, and I'm just curious how this is going to. I mean, 850 people now. I don't know if we're causing more of a problem than helping.
I don't
Okay,
know.
You're going to have a. I mean, I've seen it on our claims that you go to a claim and right down the road, you got people illegally doing this anyway, and you guys don't catch them already. So by doing only 850, you're going to have these people tearing up. I mean, they're going to wreck it.
Yeah, you know, I don't know what the future looks like for this particular bill. What I know is that the bill was passed, and you know there are good things about it and bad things about it and various viewpoints about it. I think that.
Just one more thing, does this only affect like the essential salmon habitat areas? I mean, if we have a creek, like in the middle of the state, is that going to affect me?
So
If you're on a creek that's not attached?
Yeah, these restrictions apply to any stream that has any portion of it is essential sunlight habitat.
Okay, so
And
if it
any
is
tributary to that stream. So if you look at these maps, the restrictions apply to the pink area, which is 85% of the street miles in Oregon.
So what is the penalty for, suppose someone has not been able to get their permit, or for whatever reason, suppose someone decides to mine on their claim without a permit, what's going to happen?
I think the statute calls it a misdemeanor.
And the statute actually puts them in prison for a year.
You know,
And so is there money built into this to divert the state police from important stuff, to like go out and look and see if somebody's panning or running a sluice box?
Yeah, I'm not sure how compliance monitoring will be conducted. I do know that there is a $150 permit fee to DEQ, I believe, and some of those resources are going to go towards compliance monitoring.
It's actually 300. It's 300 in the bill, in the enrolled.
Is it? I thought it was.
It's 300 in the enrolled version.
For an IP, for an individual permit. I think it's
The rules that I
150.
read that the infractions are more severe than a drunk driving hit and run. That is how severe that the rules, that's what I read in that. And I find it one of the most stiffest rules that is in the entire state of Oregon, with the most drastically easy.
So are you guys going to apply the provisions of SB 838 against somebody who's, say, out there dredging for native copper nuggets?
If they're using motorized equipment for mining precious metals.
That's actually not what your bill says. It says precious metals.
Oh, well, then, no.
Copper's not a precious metal.
Mercury, I mine for mercury.
And that's
What about
probably
lead?
not included.
Cool.
How are you guys going to regulate knowing exactly what everybody's got in their sluice box or what they're targeting in that regard?
I don't know. That's a good point.
It was never taken into consideration the gravity of the lead that was removed from the stream that it was mitigated, even though they had repeatedly, in other words, information on this, it was washed aside. And we, among us, I bet can show you some incredible lead that has been recovered.
What is iron crap? Can I go for iron crap when I go about getting a permit?
I don't think so.
Because it does say precious metals. See, that's the flaw of these stupid bills. We're just going to dredge for something else like, sneakers or something.
What if I'm running a drill in a creek? Do I need a permit for that?
Excuse me?
A drill in a creek on a vein.
A drill?
A drill.
You're just
Motorized.
drilling? Yeah, you probably need a permit.
But it's load mining. Your regulations say placer mining.
That's right, see? Stupid bill. Just pointing at us.
Even your water line was changed.
So, does anybody have any question about what we're doing?
Is a lottery system at all workable?
Lottery system. Well, I don't know.
I didn't know if that had been discussed.
Yeah, we would love actually to do it that way because it's easy. But the legislation does have a requirement for priority.
Right, that would have to be looked into it.
Yeah, I don't know.
If we have a permit the last 5 years and we don't send you a new application, we're not in the running?
Correct.
So, excuse me, I'm sorry.
If you have a permit for the last 5 years, but you don't send in a new request for a permit, for next year, you're not in the running at all.
You have to apply.
You have to apply, a new class.
Yeah, you have to apply for a permit. Their annual permits go
Yeah.
from January 1 to,
I noticed that both of you ladies are wearing jewelry. You ever have any idea where that comes from?
yeah. I gotta say, that's not very helpful.
So is it correct to say that if a person can operate a dredge without a motor power, that it doesn't need a permit?
Non-motorized, that's right.
Is that true?
But in
Is that true or not?
That's true. The restrictions don't apply if it's non-motorized.
What about hydraulic mining?
Is it non-motorized?
Yes. So we can put back in the 13 miles of ditch and get the number 5 monitors back out, as long as we contain our plume
Yeah.
in a holding pond.
They comply with water quality standards.
It's not motorized.
Can we use
Yeah.
Can we use air system? That's a motor.
We have a
So we're not
motorized
moving-
pump?
Huh? Just moving air to breathe underwater. No pumping water, breathing air. right? It's a motor, but you're not.
But ground sluicing.
So you're not moving material?
Well, you're fanning material, or, dig it with your fingers, I guess, but you're not sucking anything. I was doing climbing last week, just breathing underwater and fanning cracks, looking for gold in cracks with my fingers.
So
But I had a breather, I had a motor pumping the air.
Oh, so you had a tank?
Yeah, an air
An
tank.
oxygen tank?
Yeah.
Breathe. I wouldn't think that would be considered motorized, but
It is
it's a
a
good
motor.
question.
The motor supplying you with the air, it's not.
It's not being used to disturb material.
Right.
So any questions about what I've talked about?
So does your fill remove just apply to creeks, or is it elsewhere?
Wetlands and waterways.
So how does your fill remove authority go 300 feet on each side? If
It
that's
doesn't.
The 838 says it does.
Well, ours does not. Our permits are only working below ordinary high water.
So is that going to be implemented then possibly by DEQ?
Yes, probably.
Okay.
Ours is just for areas below ordinary high water and waterways and wetlands.
What's DSL's official definition for waterway?
Well, if you want to know what we regulate, I can provide that list to you, but
No, just what is a waterway?
a stream or a river or intermittent stream, perennial stream,
And what if it-
anything that's not ephemeral.
If it dries up in the summertime?
If it's intermittent and not ephemeral, it's jurisdictional.
That's a big word. I don't know what
Yeah, that means it's a regulated water of the state.
ephemeral?
Not ephemeral.
On page
Oh, what does ephemeral mean? Oh, ephemeral is a stream that conveys water during storm events. And it doesn't have water in it long enough to create aquatic habitat. Kind of a long definition, but we have a method for determining whether or not something's intermittent or ephemeral. And it's the same with the Clean Water Act.
These waterways are forever changing.
Can you give an explanation about taking the dredge out? Like, it needs to be expanded. We need to know what it's talking about. I've heard it, they just said in another meeting, that it just means pull it to the side of the river. Not in the middle of the river, just pull it to the side. I've also heard take it out.
Yeah, we probably need to describe that. We have.
Oh, is that- okay, you got it.
I don't know.
Page 32.
Cannot be left unattended in the waterway, I think is what the statute says.
Okay, so we pull it out of the waterways, and leave it on the side of the bank, and people steal it. What happens? It's kind of safe out in the river. On our deposit of gold that I found, that's all mine. We have to move it out, people will steal our crap, or we have to take a 600-pound dredge, move it upriver. I'm usually half a mile down from the takeout in fast water. Kind of a help hazard.
A question I have, do you camp near the
No.
dredge, or you leave it there and then you leave for the night, or how does that?
It's on the deposit. I got a 300-foot line running down the road. They were holding me in place. Backup lines tied to boulders in here. And I look for deposits of gold. I find a rich deposit, I stay on it. If it's not rich, I keep moving, right?
Right.
And it stays floating there. It's locked pretty good. But if I have to move it, it's gonna hurt just to move it to shore. This river, the Rogue River, is like 300 feet wide in some areas. It's gonna hurt. And if I have to take it out, take it home, well, then I just might as well stay home. And that's part of what they want, just to stay home, not to be out there. So I'd like clarification on that.
So, page 32, item number 3, disturbance of woody vegetation. The activity does not disturb any rooted or embedded woody plants below the ordinary high water line. Well,
That's always been in the permit.
the heck of it is, the ordinary high water line is a big debate. Because the ordinary high water line is, you'll have people saying, oh no, it's where the water is now. The ordinary high water line is way up on the banks when it floods. We all know when the flood comes, the river changes forever. It never stays the same. So you can't even tell where this activity even.
So So there is a method for determining ordinary high water, and when people know what ordinary high water means, generally, people can identify it.
I thought it up way up in the flood rate.
It is. It is the elevation at which the water flows generally in a normal year.
I disagree with that.
Well, disagree all you want, that's what it is in our regulations. So
Because it's obviously you guys have.
normally, when people understand what ordinary high water is, two people can go out and look at a stream and they get pretty darn close. They say, oh, ordinary high water is here because the vegetation changes or the substrate texture changes. There are field indicators to determine ordinary high water. Generally, people know where it is. Did you have a question?
Yeah, I was wondering if you have any mechanisms that you're considering to remove or reduce priority for anyone who is out of compliance with the structure.
So the only one that comes to mind is if the applicant has not submitted their monitoring.
So
It would be
if they got a ticket
ineligible.
from OSB, for example, for activities relating to mining,
Yeah, that's an interesting question.
they would remain in full priority and would get the permit next year.
Yeah, that's an interesting question and an interesting comment. There's nothing in this draft that
And is that
addresses
something
that.
to be considered in the next draft?
Well, this is a draft, and we'll be looking for everybody's comments, and we probably just recorded it, so. But this is the draft that's gonna go out on public notice. So, yeah, so to be eligible for the permit in 2014, you had to supply us with a monitoring report.
Yes.
Oh. Like you get from making the
Say you had a permit this year or last year. Say you got a ticket this year or last year, and would they be still placing you in front of the queue to get the new permit? You know?
Yeah, there may be some legal reasons why we can't do that, but I don't know, I'm not a lawyer. Yeah, duly noted. So, any other questions about what we're doing?
Yes, Ms. Lori, it says right here that you are the rulemaking project manager.
I am.
And a while ago we asked, why don't we have somebody that has authority? Well, you are
I
the
have a
authority.
fair amount of authority.
And my goodness, lady, you stood right here and falsified a while ago that you were just delivering the message.
You know what? We just disagree.
You're the rulemaking project manager.
We just
And
disagree.
you have overwhelmingly heard our grievances, and they have been heard. And you have turned aside, and you have swallowed this falsification overwhelmingly. Ma'am, that is criminal, what you are doing.
Any other questions?
I
I hope you found this useful. At least we conveyed some information. If we don't have your email address and you want to receive the public notice, make sure that you sign up on the sign-up sheet. We have quite a few email addresses. How did you find out? Did you receive an email for this meeting? Can I see a show of hands? How many of you received an email?
From whom? Through the citation.
Oh, okay, so they forwarded. Okay, that's good. So if you want to receive something directly from us, be sure to leave us.
And then we'll tell us how to submit comments.
You will get it directly. We will send you a notice that says rulemaking, public comment period is open or something like that. I don't know exactly what it says, but it'll say something.
I have one question. I never got a clear answer earlier. Why is it attacking central center habitat Arizona?
So I think there are people, and there is some evidence that it could potentially have an adverse effect on fish.
You know, I had two salmon run into me this year, like, kind of attacked me. They're the ones attacking me, and I'm hurting them.
So, you know, that's information that'll be
If dredging
evaluated.
has an adverse effect on salmon or steelhead, my question is, since I've never killed one myself when I was dredging, I don't know what they're dredging. Okay, I've seen them swim right past me. I've seen them sit right next to me in a whole way of dredging.
Yeah.
Okay? But that's an adverse act. What is taking a fishing line with a hook on it, hooking it, dragging it down the river and hitting its head on a rock? That's an adverse effect on salmon. Far more than what I crave. So why are we regulating fishing permits?
Well, fishing permits are regulated. Fishing
Well,
licenses are
down to
regulated,
850,
but.
down to 850,
Yeah.
just like they're trying to do to us.
So, you know, the debate about the potential effect of motorized mining on fish habitat, that's gonna happen through this work group that the governor's office has put together. I don't know who from the mining community is going to participate in that. I know that they have not set that work group up yet. They have hired a facilitator to run the work group, and I think that's about as far as they've gotten so far.